I'm Don Nigro, and I've been asked to answer some questions for you today, so I'll try to do that. The first question is, we have not been in touch for almost a year. What new works have you created during that time? I wrote a long, strange, epic thing called Surrealists, which is about the Surrealist writers and painters, their intertwined lives in the early and mid-20th century. And that was a lot of fun. It required a lot of research, and I looked at a lot of paintings, and I read a lot of things that made no sense at all. They're very funny. And very interesting people. The whole sort of movement of Surrealism and Dadaism, a lot of it grew out of the carnage and horror of the First World War, in a sense that the rational society that had led to that war was a sham, that it was in fact the product of totally selfish and irrational things, and that in order to expose that sham, they needed to embrace irrationality. And so, and the people involved that I focused on, Andre Breton, Salvador Dali, Dali's wife Gala, Max Ernst, whose work I really love, and somebody I came to love as I was writing the play, Leonora Carrington, an extraordinary artist and writer who was Max Ernst's lover. I tried to follow these people's intertwined lives through the 20th century, and they run into a problem later on. Is that if you embrace irrationality, so do some other people who aren't nearly as nice as you, like Hitler. And so, as the century progresses, the Surrealists make different choices about reality. Dali becomes a Nazi sympathizer, horrifying thing, and others who, like after World War II, made choices on the left, find themselves jumping through hoops, trying to defend the indefensible, like Stalin's murder of writers he didn't like. So the Surrealists, reality comes to get the Surrealists in this play. Anyway, I spent a lot of time on that, and I wrote a play called Phantasmagoria Electromagnetic Eye, which is about Nikola Tesla, the inventor, and his relationships with Thomas Edison, the famous American inventor, J.P. Morgan, the financier who helped finance some of Tesla's work, and J. Edgar Hoover, who ultimately got rid of him. And it's really about the innocent, mystical, idealistic Mr. Tesla coming in contact with crude, vulgar, violent, ruthless American capitalists. So I worked on those two plays, but I also wrote a play called 1949, which is about everything I might have heard in the womb during the summer of 1949. I have these weird, they're not even memories really, it's just this sense that I was somehow listening to music and aware of conversations when I was in the womb. And I started exploring that idea by just gathering together the music of 1949, the news from 1949, things that were going on in the world in the year 1949. And so I wrote a kind of collage play. I got interested in collage from writing Surrealists, and that led me to write 1949, which is sort of a collage play, which puts together news and the personal lives of these people, somewhat the way the novelist John Dos Passos did. So I wrote those, and also a number of other shorter plays, monologues, things like that. So been fairly busy. The second question is, do you watch performances or records of performances based on your plays? And what do you think about free directorial interpretations? I used to be at all of my productions. And then I started having more productions, and I couldn't be at them all. But I spent about a quarter of a century traveling to all these productions, and I was intimately involved in every aspect of them, and I liked that very much. And I still, now I don't travel. I have responsibilities here that make it difficult for me to do that. So I mostly stay home and write now. But yeah, I loved being in production. I especially love rehearsal. I love the exploratory process in rehearsal. But I don't see productions anymore unless folks send me videos of things. And what do I think about free directorial interpretation? Well, that's a can of worms. Every contract, every production contract states that the producing organization agrees to do the play exactly as written. And I believe in that. And I have militantly supported the rights of playwrights over the years, because in America, there is one popular strain of American theater is this idea that of script development, that you sort of it's the let's all get together and help you fix up your play school of art, and I don't like that. So I don't do that. My idea of collaboration in the theater is that we collaborate on the production, and we collaborate on every aspect of the production, but I write the play. So, but I do think that some of my plays lend themselves much more readily to freer interpretations, and Animal Tales is very much one of those plays, partly because of its own inherent nature. And it specifies in the text that you don't have to do all 11 plays. You don't have to do them in the order in which they appear in the text. And each of the pieces is pretty surreal to begin with, and they don't really specify necessarily in great detail how they need to be done. So the play itself sort of invites free interpretation, and it's had a lot of free interpretation, and I've enjoyed them very much. I especially like this production here. This is a wonderful production of Animal Tales, and in every aspect, it's just beautifully done. What encourages you to create? What does inspire you the most? Well, I don't always know where these things come from. I mean, there is often I don't think it's any particular kind of thing that inspires me. It's sometimes there's an apparently arbitrary external compulsion. Somebody wants to play about Robin Hood, or I see something, or I read something, or something happens to me, or I dream something, or something like that. But what's constant in wherever the play seems to come from, what's constant is that if there is that apparent arbitrary external compulsion, whatever happens, it opens up a door in my head and lets out something that's been scratching to get out for some time. That's the one constant about everything I've written, is that whatever happens as an external stimulus, what it does invariably is open up this like door in the back of my head, and stuff comes pouring out from my subconscious. All the good stuff is in my subconscious, and I don't have direct access to it ordinarily. But there are ways in which, if you leave the door open, it'll start flowing out, and sometimes something will stimulate that, whatever it is, whether it's a dream or an experience or something I read or whatever it is. There's this thing itching at my head, and then the door opens and it starts out, and it may just be a word or an image or a memory, or it could be anything, but if it won't go away, I always have a notebook with me, and I'm always sort of scribbling down these things, and eventually something will start to accumulate, like a ball of yarn or something, and a play will begin to form. So the one constant thing is that everything good comes from my subconscious, and I don't write ever to illustrate something I think I know. I always write to find something out, like where that came from or what it meant to me or why it wouldn't go away. And often in the course of writing, I don't necessarily find the answer to that question. I may find the answer to some quite different question that I didn't even know I wanted to ask. It's very mysterious. But as long as I keep the door to my subconscious open, as long as I can find a way to get that door open, good stuff comes out. And then I write it down, and then I see what I've got. And eventually, with any luck, it turns into a play. The third question is, as it is known, the fourth question, the playwright Bernard Shaw did not get to work without drinking a few cups of coffee. And what kind of household trivia and habits do help you to work? The reason I took off my glasses because there was a terrible glare I couldn't get rid of here. But now I can't see the screen very well, so that's why I'm so close to you. Probably I'm scaring you. Sorry. But the question is about writing habits, household habits that help me write. And it's true that at various times in my life I've gotten into these routines that have helped me write. Writing at a certain time, writing with a certain color ink, writing with a certain color paper, having a cup of tea, having the cat sit there in a certain place, whatever. At various times in my life, I have fallen into routines that were productive. But the thing, and whatever you can use like that, fine, use it, go with it. That's great. But you also need to understand that life will keep changing on you, and you can't rely entirely on those routines or those habits to be able to write. You can't say, well, if I can't have that kind of ink, I can't write, or if I can't have that paper, I can't write, or if I can't have my old Smith Corona typewriter, I can't write. I've had to make a number of different adjustments over the years. I wrote for many years on a little manual Smith Corona portable, and I must have worked for 20 years on that, and I was very comfortable writing with that typewriter, but they stopped making them, essentially, and mine was so old that the keys would come flying out and hit me in the face. And they keep flying off, and I'd have to keep getting it soldered, and finally I had to move on to electric typewriters, which I hated, and to computers, which I like. But I still mostly begin scribbling. I still mostly write in a notebook for a while until it gets so messy and so convoluted that I have to go to the computer, clean it up, print it out, and scribble all over the printout. I have to have a printed copy. I can't just write in the computer, but I use the computer to clean up what I write in. And that's more of a habit than anything else. If I had my wish, I would start out writing in the morning with a cup of tea, and I'd work for a few hours before lunch. I can't do that now. My mornings are 3 hours of solid other stuff that I have to do every day. So I write when I can. I write in stolen moments. You can't. Routines are good if they help you be productive, but you can't become enslaved by them. You have to be able to adjust. You have to keep being able to adjust if you're going to be a writer over a long period of time. One of the plays of mine I like the most, the play about Pushkin, I wrote in a notebook in the cafeteria of a hospital when my father was in intensive care, and I would go to that cafeteria. My life was a nightmare then, but I would go to the cafeteria every day because it wouldn't let me in there with him for very long, and I would sit in the cafeteria and I would write. And I wrote almost all of that play there in that cafeteria, and it was great because within that framework I could escape the horrors that were happening around me and just live in Pushkin's world and write about the horrors that were around him. So routines are good, but don't be trapped in them. And I have to, let me see what the next question is. Based on your plays, many literary genres are under your control. Detective, comedy, melodrama, parody, mysticism. How do you classify your own works? Well, the thing is, I don't classify them. And in fact, I've been criticized a lot for writing work that is not classifiable. I like genres. I like different styles of play, different approaches, different conventions, and I often explore them, and partly I'm subverting them I mean, I'm making fun of them to some extent, but I'm also taking them on another level quite seriously, and I'm kind of turning them inside out to see what's in there. So you can have a genre that looks like it's old and faded and clunky, and you can make a little bit of fun of it, but if you also look closely at it and take it seriously for a moment, you can find the original truths that sort of created the genre, the kinds of perceptions that made it happen to begin with. And I also will combine different genres, different sets of conventions, different styles in odd ways, and different moods, so that quite often my plays are both funny and tragic, kind of sometimes at the same moment. And that sometimes disconcerts American theaters. Americans often want things to be a lot simpler than that. And the world that I see is a bizarre combination of tragedy and farce, and that often shows up in my plays. But also other kinds of combinations of conventions and emotions show up in my work, and I like that. I like the fact that you can use anything, any set of conventions from any time or any place, and you can combine them, and you can turn them inside out, and you can examine them, and you can discover new things about stuff you may have thought you knew everything about, but you didn't really. So, but I don't like classifications. I don't like labels. I subvert them whenever possible. I'm having to. Okay, here we go. You used to direct, and if you were directing now, what kind of play of yours would you put on? Is the question. I don't know. Yeah, I'm the sort of person who, if I were in a situation where I could direct, I would want to scope out the actors first. I would want to see who was available. There's no point in directing something if you don't have the right actors to do it. So I would want to see at what level the actors were working, how many people I could rely on, who the most interesting ones were, and then I would sort of select one of my plays that I thought the people available could do well. But if I just could pick anything, mostly what I enjoyed was directing the plays of mine, which are big and complicated, theatrically really complicated to stage. The sort of plays that other directors would look at and say, well, this reads very entertainingly, but obviously it's impossible to stage this. I loved staging those and making those work and showing them, no, this is how you do it. Read the stage directions, trust the play, and look, it works. So I love moving people around on stage. I love productions where I love the sorts of plays of mine where there are a lot of people and they move back and forth in time and space, and people can appear and disappear from any place on stage, and there are no blackouts, and everything flows. And I like the complex. I love doing the complex, and I'm probably better at that than I would be at directing something simple and more natural and real. So that's probably what I would do. But I think I was a good director, but I don't think I want to do it again, because I am by nature deeply introverted, and directing requires me to open up in a much more extroverted way and do like 12 things at once that I ordinarily would not want to do. Be a psychologist and a field general and a tactician and all kinds of things like that. And it was good for me. I love directing. But it just about killed me because I had to be so extroverted when I'm not that way. So it was good for me, but I would always lose like 25 pounds when I directed. And so it's probably better for the world and for me if I don't do that anymore. Leave it to other people who have more energy. The last question is, yesterday in one of the largest libraries of St. Petersburg, a public reading of your Russian play based on Anton Chekhov's plays took place. Do you really imagine the life of Russians is so hopeless and irrational as it appears to be in that play? No, I swear to you, I do not imagine that the lives of Russians in particular are particularly hopeless and irrational. I imagine that my life is hopeless and irrational, and because of that, I tend to presume that probably everybody else's is too, but I could be really mistaken about that. But no, that's not it. I wrote a Russian play. The title of it is a Russian play. Because I was just in love with Chekhov's plays and with Turgenev's A Month in the Country and with Chekhov's short stories. And I just loved being in the world of those plays. And I missed them when I had sort of read them too many times. And so I tried to write a play in which I could live in that atmosphere for a while I was writing it. And I had a wonderful time writing the play. I just read all these Chekhov short stories, and I reread the 6 big Chekhov plays and the Turgenev play, and I just sort of lived in that world, and all these characters appeared, and they had Russian names, and they were doing Chekhovian kinds of things, and it was at the same time funny and tragic, and I was having a little fun. I was writing a kind of gentle parody of a Chekhov play, but it was also quite serious, and I cared very much about the characters, and I did in that what I often do, which is allowed something to be funny while it was being also secretly quite serious. The thing is, I mean, I guess I have a really dark view of the world. I mean, I do see it as hopeless and irrational. I think our situation is hopeless, ultimately hopeless and irrational. I mean, we have, for short periods of time, in certain circumscribed circumstances, we can find things that make it worth living, despite the hopelessness and irrationality of our lives. There's love, and there's art, and there's the quest for knowledge to try to understand things. And all of those things are what sort of keep me going. But, I mean, everything you love is mortal. It's going to die. Everything you create is going to be destroyed. Even if it does survive after you're gone, you're not going to know about it, and the sun's going to blow up, and it's all going to burn up. And no matter how much knowledge you acquire in your life, how much joy you take from gradually accumulating that knowledge, you're only going to know a little tiny bit of what's really going on in this impossibly large, impossibly old, impossibly indifferent universe in which we're these little bugs crawling around on a ball of dirt. So that's what art is for, I think, is to give us something, some reason to live, where we can, and theater especially is a kind of combination of all those things. It's art, of course, but it's also love. And it's a quest for knowledge. Every play I write is an investigation into truth, and based on love of people and things and just life itself. And it gives me the reason to keep going. I make these investigations into truth, and somehow it doesn't seem, while I'm doing it, as with love and other things, it doesn't seem quite so hopeless and irrational while I'm involved. And theaters are places where we go to experience these things together. And we have the wonderful, very necessary, warm illusion of company, of communion, as we're experiencing these things together. We're laughing and crying and paying attention and caring and arguing, and we don't feel so alone. Theaters are places where you go where you don't feel so alone. So, I'm really grateful that this theater's doing my play, and they're doing a wonderful job with it, and I hope you enjoy it, and I always enjoy speaking